Well, 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 good afternoon, everyone, and thank you for joining our press briefing. We moved up to 1 p.m. Because we know a lot of you have deadlines, and it's important for us to help you meet those deadlines. And so, going forward, we will keep them at 1 p.m. For your convenience. As I mentioned today, and in the itinerary that you got for today's meeting, we're going to be discussing a number of things regarding reentry and repopulation. Reentry and repopulation are two different things, so it's important to keep that in mind. And in the interest of time, because Kelsey Scanlon from our Department of Emergency Management is simultaneously in a meeting with CAL FIRE, or will be in a meeting with CAL FIRE, and so we wanted to give Kelsey the courtesy of going first, and we will open it up to questions for Kelsey before we open it up to questions for everybody else because of her schedule. So I'd like to welcome Kelsey Scanlon, who's one of our chief planners at the Department of Emergency Management, and who's very much the backbone of this operation at the Emergency Operations Center. Welcome, Kelsey, and please begin with your opening remarks.
Hi, thank you so much for having me. So I just wanted to provide some overall edification on the reentry and repopulation process. It's a fairly complex concept in that we start planning for reentry and repopulation while we're still actively responding. One of the more complex issues is, when is it safe for critical infrastructure and utility organizations to get into an impacted area to start assessing the damages to their assets, right? And so throughout this process, we meet multiple times a day with our utility partners, public works, fire, law, building services, to assess the overall impact to the community that's been evacuated, and what emergency repairs need to be conducted to ensure that reentry and repopulation is safe for not just the disaster service workers in the area, but also the community at large. So this includes agencies such as CAL FIRE, North County Fire, Building Services, Environmental Health, PG&E, Public Works, Caltrans. It's a list of about 30 different agencies that have a responsibility for ensuring that the community is safe when they return. So one of the things that we talked about recently was the CAL FIRE damage assessment teams. They came through, they did their windshield surveys and produced that map that has been so useful for the community to have an understanding of the impact to their structure before they go home. And so behind them, and a couple of presenters after me will talk about this, building services and environmental health are simultaneously assessing more in depth the structural integrity and safety of the dwellings before people return home. Also at the same time, as Randy Ishii, our Public Works Director, previously mentioned, they're also cleaning the roads, typically repairing the roads, so that it is safe for people to drive on them and enter upon evacuation orders being lifted. Additionally, you'll also typically see Pacific Gas and Electric either restoring lines or checking for gas leaks, which they are also currently doing. And then, of course, the other two large factors in this is water and sewage, right? And so Randy, I believe, presented earlier in a press release has been issued prior to this, in that there are damages to critical infrastructure that make it uninhabitable at this point in time. And so we're actively working to address those problems so that it is safe for the community of Pajaro to return and resume and start recovering from this very significant incident. And so with that high level overview, I will open it up to questions, unless there's something in particular, Nick, that you'd like me to address further.
I think that's good from an overview standpoint. Does anybody have any questions? And if you do, please raise your hands and I'll recognize you. All right, so we have Ray from the Monterey County Weekly with his hand raised. Ray, go ahead and ask your question, please.
Thanks, Nick, and thank you, Kelsey, for your time today to discuss this. Thanks for the overview as well of this, the various state and local agencies kind of involved in this. As from DEM's perspective, can you give me a better sense of kind of what federal resources are on the ground right now to help you guys with all of this? I understand that there, my understanding, and correct me if I'm wrong, right now FEMA this qualifies under the Category B classification, for FEMA's disaster relief, which enables kind of immediate emergency relief efforts to reach this community. But from what I've heard and people we've spoken to, it seems like maybe those resources aren't immediately forthcoming right now for whatever reason. So if you give me a sense of what we're seeing on the ground right now in terms of that federal support, I'd really appreciate your insight to that.
Yeah, that's a great question, and I appreciate you asking it. The county has requested state and federal support for response and recovery efforts for the community of Pajaro, as well as the entirety of the Monterey County operational area, and that letter sits with the state. We have not been declared a federal emergency, and we are actively working with our elected officials to get the community of Pajaro the relief that they desperately need. In the meantime, while we wait for Cal OES and FEMA, essentially what you'll see on the ground is a lot of county agencies getting to work, working as efficiently and as effectively as possible. You'll see a lot of really amazing nonprofits on the ground who have partnered with us. And you'll see some private contractors in the area, as well as some Cal OES recovery folks. So until that federal declaration comes to fruition, it will be difficult to get federal support. But we have submitted that paperwork and actively requested that support from the state and federal government.
And then as far as the Category B aid, like is that forthcoming? I mean, is that available? Is that something that the Pajaro community is eligible for right now in terms of like immediate emergency support? I mean,
so the way public assistance works is that there's categories A through G, and it really only applies to government agencies and special districts and some nonprofits. And they categorize the types of eligible activities. So debris removal, emergency response, permanent work for utilities, parks, etc. What I think you're asking about is individual assistance. And individual assistance is a component of public assistance, and that's something that is on a case-by-case basis dependent on the emergency. We have requested individual assistance for the community members, and we're still waiting to hear about FEMA's determination.
Thank you for that, Kelsey. Appreciate it. We'll go to Sarah Rubin with the Monterey County Weekly. Sarah, welcome, and please go ahead with your question.
Thank you, and thank you so much, Kelsey, for joining this group today. I think it's really great that you are here, and I have some of the same questions I had last week that I'm hoping you're the person who can answer them. One is, if inspectors from any of these various agencies who are going in find any kind of non-compliant buildings or different potential code violations that predate the floods, is there any plan for what to do? Is there any assurance to property owners that they will not be penalized or things grandfathered in, or what happens in those circumstances? Is my first question. I have 3 questions. So
yeah, I'll defer that one to building services, but from our perspective, we're only here to look at the immediate threat to public health and safety. We're not particularly interested in code compliance from decades before or years before. We really just are looking at, is this structure habitable and is it safe for them to go home?
Thank you, and I do hope somebody on this call today could answer that question. And then another question for you, and I think you said it was something on the order of about 30 agencies. I'm really hoping, and the thing that people in Pajaro are asking us is, what is the list of agencies? We've gotten really general descriptions of some of the agencies and some of the types of things that they're looking at. Is there a place that we could find a list of the agencies that all must sign off before a structure is cleared? Is there like a handy PDF that any of us can find right now?
Specifically just for residential structures, it's the CAL FIRE Damage Assessment Team, Monterey County Environmental Health Bureau of the Health Department, and the Building Services Division of the Monterey County Housing and Community Development Department.
And
Sarah, but that's just for residential structures. We look at the overall safety of the community, and there are many more agencies beyond just that assessment of residential structures.
Thank you. That's helpful. And then one other question that is coming from residents is, if they live in a unit that is like a unit 1 or a unit A, maybe an ADU or something like it that is associated with a main address, and they're seeing on the CAL FIRE map whatever the status is of the address. Has CAL FIRE in its inspection looked at each separate structure on the property? Or, you know, if there's different units, A, B, C, D, might they have different designations, and how do people find that out is the question.
Yes, they look at the structure as a whole, not by parcel, and they, to my understanding, do not delineate if it's one structure with multiple units in it, the difference between the two. So if you're seeing one point, but there's multiple addresses for that one structure, you can assume that that little icon is adequate.
Right, and Sarah, they one of the things they made a very strong effort in doing is counting everything that was a dwelling, so that people could get the necessary support and resources that they could once this declaration gets hopefully gets approved by FEMA. They were very diligent about that. And just so everybody knows, we're only doing Q&A right now for Kelsey because she does have to go to a CAL FIRE meeting. I'm just going to take two more quick questions. We're going to go to John first and then Victor. John, if you could go ahead and ask your question, try to make it as brief as possible because Kelsey's expected in a meeting in a few minutes. Go ahead, John. John Woolfolk, are you on? John, we can't hear you. We're going to go to Victor Guzman. Victor, please go ahead with your question. Victor, would you want the response in Spanish as well?
I think this will be a short answer, so I think we'll be okay. But it sounded like Kelsey, Victor Guzman, KION, CBS here in Monterey, Salinas. You said that letter, as far as federal support or request for federal support, that letter sits with the state. Is that basically saying the county's done what they can to apply? We're just basically waiting on the state to feed it off to DC?
Yes, sir.
Great. Thank you, Victor. John, did you manage to get your mic working? It seems like John has not. We'll go to Haley Smith real quick.
Hear me?
Yes, we can. John, you're back muted. I'm going to go to Haley. Go ahead, Haley.
Hi, thanks. I had to join a little late, so I apologize if I missed this, but can someone give a quick status update on the levee itself? Has it been fully repaired at this point, or what's the latest on that?
Okay, I'll go ahead and do that. Since we didn't have water resources, the focus was on re-entry and repopulation. The levee breach has been repaired in its first phase, the emergency phase of the repair, which means that it has been filled in with rock material, numerous different types of rock material to strengthen it, and it has been raised to the level of the original height of the levee. And the maintenance will continue on that particular juncture until we know all these rain events are out of our way, and until they can start to make permanent repairs to that section. All right. John, I'll give you one last chance before Kelsey leaves because she's got to go to a meeting.
Can you hear me?
Yes, I can.
So my question, it's basically what I asked Maya this morning was, can you tell us when is the earliest that people can get into see their properties, re-entry, and the earliest they can repopulate, go back to their properties, assuming that that it's habitable? Like, what kind of a time frame are we looking at here? And you also mentioned that there's like some kind of thing that they could look up on a computer how to see the status of their property. And I'm wondering, do a lot of these people have access to a computer if they're evacuated from their home? Thank you.
Thank you. So for the map, that's the easy question here. They can call 211 for assistance in navigating the map. I believe they also have access at the shelter. As for the estimated time frame, I do want to really reiterate, we evaluate this every single hour of every single day. We are constantly looking at a time window for when we can allow the community back in. And every hour, it's a new moving piece of damage that needs to be repaired. And so while I don't have a firm date for you now, we are looking towards the end of the week.
Thank you, Kelsey, for that. Yeah, and John, we do, not only did we have, do we have computers, we have additional computers on their way out to the shelter right now for that very thing. And we also are creating segmented maps and printouts of maps in color so people can pinpoint that information. So we are making every effort we can. Myself and Sonia De La Rosa, our county administrative officer, were out there yesterday on laptops showing people the damage. So we're going to get Kelsey go. Thank you, Kelsey. I know you have to go meet with CAL FIRE. We appreciate your time. And we're going to continue with our briefing. I would like to introduce to you Marni Flagg from our Environmental Health Division, who is going to talk about processes and procedures for our folks to be able to re-enter and eventually repopulate. Welcome, Marni, to the briefing.
Thank you. Good afternoon, everyone. I just want to update Environmental Health is conducting inspections of structures out in Pajaro that are impacted by floodwaters. We're evaluating potential for health-related hazards. We focus on what people should do for universal precautions once they are re-entering their homes. We have posted colored signs at the structures to alert people of what they may experience when they go inside, and providing guidance on what should be done upon re-entry. So if anyone has any questions about any aspects of that, I can take any questions for that.
Okay, great. Thank you, Marni. We'll wait till the end for questions. I did want to mention Sarah Rubin from the Weekly asked a specific question about building inspections, and we do have Craig Spencer on from Housing Development Housing and Community Development Department that will answer that question that you had, Sarah, when we get to the Q&A. Craig, thanks for being here, and just stand by for that question. Appreciate it. Let's continue to go on with our briefing today. And we have Tom Vonnegut, who's the Assistant Director of the County of Monterey Public Works Department, to give an update on what's been accomplished and what is ongoing with regard to public works and the sewer system. Welcome, Tom.
Sure, thank you, Nick. So let me quickly recap some information that has been covered, but just to be clear. So streets, Public Works is responsible for that, as you know. So those have been cleaned, debris has been removed, they've been swept, sidewalks cleaned, with the exception of just 2 segments of 2 streets on the east side of the community. Potholes have been patched. There are a couple larger locations. We will address those with a contractor, but those are not going to hold up potential repopulation efforts. So we've addressed streets pretty well. The sanitary system in the community of Pajaro, the sewer lines and the manholes have been cleaned. That work is completed. We are currently, as I think many are aware, using over a dozen large trucks to truck wastewater to the Watsonville treatment plant, and that continues while we are pursuing a repair of our force main line, which runs from the main pump station in Pajaro to the Watsonville treatment plant. And that is continuing to move along. Materials have been ordered. The contractor is making their preparations for the repair work. And if all goes well, we do hope to have that facility and that force main back online by Wednesday. More to come on there. And that's the end of my report, unless there are questions for me. Thank you.
Thank you, Tom. And if you stand by, we'll do Q&A following the remainder of the department briefings. All right, appreciate that very much. And we have from in our health department to talk about health services at the shelter. Let me see if I can find Deborah Hopgood. Deborah, are you available to go on camera? And there you are. Welcome, Deborah. And can you please give our friends in the media some information with regard to the steps that the county has taken to make sure that the health needs of people are being met?
Good afternoon. Absolutely. One of our primary priorities from the very beginning of this operation has been to provide a safe place for those impacted by the storms and the flooding, and that involves ensuring their health and safety and their well-being at those shelters. We have many client population members from vulnerable populations, such as children, the elderly, or the chronically ill. Many people who came to us with pre-existing medical conditions. Those may have been well managed at home, but being in the shelter environment can certainly exacerbate those, and just the stress, anxiety, and grief that comes along with going through the incident that's occurred. So in order to do that, in addition to support from our Monterey County Public Health and Behavioral Health Bureau, we've had additional support from Santa Cruz County Public Health and their behavioral health. We've also been able to bring in community health providers. These are people who provide already services in the community, have existing relationships with those residents who are in the shelters, know their medical backgrounds, are able to help with some of their chronic medical conditions and their advanced case management needs, such as providing items such as prescription medications or important medical equipment that may have been needed to be left behind in the immediate evacuation from the area. So on top of that, we also have people who have emergency medical needs and basic first aid needs that occur at the shelters as well. So we were able to receive some assistance from both the California Medical Assistance Team and then the American Red Cross as well, to bring in both physician and registered nurse and EMT level staffing to the shelter and provide 24/7 medical care for the residents of the shelter. In addition, we've brought in several behavioral health resources and other case management to meet the needs of the shelter residents as well.
Thank you, Deborah. And I'll just add to what Deborah was saying with regard to mental health. We're also facilitating folks from the faith community to come in and provide counsel for those folks that are interested in receiving that type of support, spiritual support. So the county is making every single effort to make sure those needs are being met. And moving to the shelter services now, we have Rodrick Franks, the Assistant Director of the Department of Social Services with us today to just kind of give an update on shelter services and the commitment that we have to continuing to shelter people as long as it's necessary. Rodrick, welcome to today's briefing.
Thank you, Nick. Good afternoon, everyone. The Monterey County Department of Social Services and the Department of Emergency Management will continue to provide sheltering for those impacted by this event throughout the entirety of the repopulation effort as is required. Our shelters are open and staffed 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, and our staff are working to provide a safe, secure, caring, and compassionate environment for all of our shelter guests. We wouldn't be able to do that without our many partners who currently include the County of Santa Cruz, the City of Watsonville, the American Red Cross, as well as the California Department of Social Services. We've established a resource center, as was indicated earlier, on site for our shelter guests, where we host a variety of local community-based organizations to provide an array of services to our shelter guests, preparing for what's coming next, and also providing shelter guests with needed commodities and items that have been donated by the community. The SPCA continues to work with the pets of our shelter guests, providing on-site care at the shelter, as well as shelter and boarding off-site. Those being boarded off-site will be reunited with their owners when that time is coming. We currently have capacity to serve all who will require sheltering services. Right now at the Santa Cruz Fairgrounds, we are hosting 375 guests. And we currently have a capacity of 425, as well as additional capacity at our 3 other shelters.
Thank you very much, Rodrick, for that update. I know Adriana Fredericks put a question in the chat about the population, the shelter census, and Maya has put that in the chat for you, Adriana. All right, so, and Sarah, I saw your question in the chat. We will get to that. I'm seeing all the questions come up, so just stand by and we'll get to that. So real briefly, we have Katy Castagna, who's been very kind and being on these briefings with us quite a bit lately and seeing a lot of Katy. We appreciate that very, very much. Can you just talk briefly about the 211 resources that are going to be available and continue to be available to disaster evacuees and disaster victims as we move into the recovery phase of this disaster?
Sure, Nick. Thank you so much and good afternoon, everybody. 211 is really proud to be a partner in this effort in supporting the county, all of the public information about resources available. So we're continuing to provide information and referrals 24/7. We have professional live call specialists who speak English and Spanish, who are available to speak to people around the clock. So as this disaster progresses, there's different types of resources needed. So we continue to have information on evacuation zones, road closures, sandbag distributions, and mobile resources, for example, as well as shelter resources as we move into recovery. All of those new resources as they come in, we will be sure that 211 has information on how you access those resources. So we are updating the resources hourly, and we continue to be a trusted go-to place for confidential information. I also just want to point out that we're continuing to do what I consider our day job. And so residents throughout the county can still call 211 for help with whether it is utility assistance, substance abuse treatment, COVID testing, and vaccination resources. All of those are still really important supports that we provide to the community. So in addition to the daily needs that 211 continues to provide, we're having a very dynamic support system. And then I just one more thing around those maps that people can access online. We are supporting callers who need help navigating those maps. And so we can help talk people through those resources as well with a phone call. And that's by, again, calling 211. Thank you so much.
That's great, Katie. Thank you. And I do also want to mention that for those of you that may not know, we actually have one of Kelsey's colleagues here, Calissa King, with United Way, who is the manager of the 211 program for the Monterey County United Way, embedded here in our PIO office. She's actually sitting right behind me, but you can't see her because I have this beautiful picture behind me. But she's here, and United Way goes to the very same briefings that all of our staff go to. So they're getting up to the minute information and resources so that they can provide that information, help us provide that information to the community. And so we are grateful for them. I'm going to move quickly to Beth Brookhouser. Beth is the Vice President of Communications and Public Information Officer for the SPCA of Monterey County. We know people's pets are important to them. They're important to us because most of us have pets as well. And it's very, very important that the community know what the SPCA has done, what the SPCA is doing, and what they will continue to do, because we continue to get questions about pets. And so Beth, why don't you give a very quick 35,000-foot overview of how we partner with the SPCA.
Hi, everyone. SPCA Monterey County is now caring for 220 pets that were evacuated from Pajaro. We've also rescued dozens more from flooded areas and reunited them with their families. And we're providing free pet food and supplies to all local emergency shelters and to anyone who is evacuating with their pets. And like I said, all our disaster response services are completely free to our community, thanks to the support of our donors. We work very closely with the Office of Emergency Services and all first responders to evacuate pets and help people during disasters like this. Our disaster response team continues to rescue animals in Pajaro every day. And we are there right now helping pets and people and giving out free pet food. So we encourage everyone in our community to contact us if you need help. We are here for you. Information about how you can help rescued pets or how you can get help during a disaster is available on our website. And if anyone needs help evacuating a pet from the area or getting free pet food or supplies for their pets, or helping animals that are safe but the owners can't get to, we can provide, our officers can provide food and water to animals who are in the Pajaro area. So we are continuing to be here for anyone in need. And like 211, we continue all our other programs as well.
Thank you so much, Beth. And we at the County of Monterey, I can tell you that we are so grateful for your partnership. And I also want to note for the media that SPCA has a seat at the table here at the EOC. Again, just like United Way and so many of our other partners, they are on the same briefings that our staff is on and our first responders are on. So thank you to the SPCA. Another partner that we work very, very closely with is the American Red Cross. In times of disaster, It's the American Red Cross that's always there. And we have Steve Walsh, who's the Regional Public Information Officer for the American Red Cross. Steve, please share with us the resources and services that the Red Cross is providing and what they will provide as we move more into this recovery phase of this horrible disaster. Steve, welcome. We can't hear you, Steve. Your mic is not working. Okay, while Steve will come back to you in the interest of time. I'm going to jump over now to the county's county administrative officer, Sonia De La Rosa. Sonia and I spent the entire day yesterday out at the shelter visiting with families, and I thought it was important that Sonia give you her perspective in talking to those families and some of the things that the families brought up with Sonia as the chief executive of our county, and how we're taking those things and putting them in action. Sonia, welcome to this briefing, and go right ahead.
Thank you for joining us this afternoon. We've spent quite a bit of time at the shelters and continue to address issues as they appear on site, and as the folks are sharing some of the challenges that they're having, both of staying at our shelter, but also in anticipation of going back to their homes, or the reality that they may not be able to go to their homes based on the situation at the level of impact from the floods. We did thank them for their patience. A lot of folks have gone through a roller coaster of emotions, and even as we were sharing the map with them of the damages to the homes, the reality of what they'll be looking at is very hard for them to adapt to. Some folks have had a chance to look at their homes because they've had to return for one thing or another that has been urgent or is important to them due to their health. And they have shared with others what they have seen, and some of the things that they'll have to address, such as some of the smells that are there, but also some of the debris, and really, again, the reality that a lot of the things that they left behind may not be salvageable. So some of the questions that have come up have been related to debris removal. Many also related to the possibility of the property owner not having that home available anymore for them to be able to rent, whether it is because the home itself has been compromised or because the property owner does not have the means or the ability to address the challenges that are now present in their home. There was, again, a lot of eagerness to return, but then once we shared with the folks the sewer system issues and also the water issues, there was an understanding. There's a lot of children that are in our shelter right now, and these are families that are, rely on each other, and it's the difficulty of having to return to these homes and do these cleanups that are needed while you still have very small children in the home is something that they're trying to plan for. And also on our side, we're trying to see how we could better support those that will be returning to their homes. And perhaps this is going to be somewhat a staged return, because it's going to require quite a bit of cleanup before we can have any children or any adults living in some of these homes. We did explain the types of contaminants, that where the contaminants may potentially be in the homes, in the yard, in the furniture, those businesses, and all the other items that may have been left behind. There was also some concern about all the vehicles that were left behind and whether or not those vehicles are going to work. As many of you have likely seen in photos, there's quite a few vehicles that were left behind that likely support more than one household or more than one family, because this is a very low-income community. There's quite a reliance among each other to get themselves to work and also to support each other when they are at work. In addition to that, we did explain the road conditions and the work that the Public Works Department is doing and in trying to address the sewage system issues and making sure that the roads are safe to be traveled on and clean and free of large items that may have moved onto the road. There's quite a bit of still unknown in when it comes to our population that might be coming back and of some of their needs. So we will continue to meet with them to try to identify what else we could prepare for them. This yesterday was the first time that they began to hear whether or not their home was impacted and at what level it was impacted. But then the understanding that the reason they can't go home at this time is because the sewage doesn't work. So although the home may be in a good condition, we still have an issue with water and the sewage system. Sure, it was probably explained earlier, and I apologize if I checked, I was taking a call for just a moment. We are using 12 trucks to move the sewage right now, and the population will result in significantly more trucks that will be needed. So there's a little bit of planning that's being done also, on that end. And some of the kits that will be provided to our folks will include not just debris removal kits, but also appropriate personal protective equipment that we need to make sure that our families know how to use as they go back into the community. So many of the concentration yesterday was the fact that our population here is 75% renters and maybe a 25% that are privately owned, and a lot of questions about having just paid rent at the beginning of March and now having been out of the home for the majority of March, or what seems to be like a majority. I think it's been over 10 days that they've been out of the homes now, and some of the questions related to that, and then some are also related to the schools where their children are going to go to school now, that they can't go back to the same school that they were at before. So that's some of what we're hearing from our community.
Thank you, Sonia. We appreciate that. I want to go back to the American Red Cross. I think Steve is still having technical issues. We have Martin, or Steve, are you back in business?
I think I'm good, yes.
Yes, you are. Good. Go ahead, Steve. We're running a little bit over on time. I like to leave about a half hour for Q&A. So if you could just briefly tell us how the Red Cross is going to support this effort. And I know you've got a lot of people on the ground with us in our shelter operations and doing damage assessments yourself. So please go right ahead.
Sure. So across the state in the affected areas, we have around 590 volunteers on the ground. Specifically in Monterey County, the Red Cross is providing health services, mental health services, and supplies as needed. And we're in the process right now of continuing to establish mobile feeding routes for communities or neighborhoods that may not have access to meals or food. And that's going to be ongoing.
And will you also be providing cleanup kits as you have historically in the past on floods?
That is right. That goes under supplies. Absolutely. So that's everything you need when you need to go back to your home to start going through what's there, to find what's important to you, and also to, while you're doing it, to stay safe, masks, gloves, etc.
Great. Thank you for that. And we appreciate your help. I'm going to go to Q&A now, and I want to go back to Sarah Rubin. Sarah, you had a question before with regard to a housing inspection and whatnot. And we were able to get Craig Spencer on the line from that unit from the county. Craig is also here in the Emergency Operations Center doing his additional job now in planning. So Sarah, if you'd like to re-ask your question, and Craig will do the best he can to provide you with an adequate answer.
Thank you, Nick. Thank you, Craig. The question is, if inspectors find any evidence of pre-existing code violations or things like, a garage converted into a dwelling, say, for example, something that was not properly permitted, is there any kind of commitment that those things are grandfathered in, or what happens in the course of discovering possible code violations that might have predated and be unrelated to the flood?
Yeah, thank you. Craig Spencer with Housing and Community Development. Our inspectors are not looking for building or zoning violations while they're out there. They are simply looking at, is that structure safe to re-enter, or is there some remediation that needs to happen in order for that structure to be safe to re-enter? So there will be some information provided that an inspector's been there, they've taken a look. If there's a red tag, that means it's not safe to re-enter. If there's a yellow or no tag, then you may just need to clean up in order to prevent mold and things of that sort. So there's no documentation of permits, zoning violations, or anything of that sort. It's really just focused on the safety of the structure and its structural integrity and ability to re-enter and reoccupy.
Thank you, Craig, for that. And just hang tight for just a few more minutes. I know you're super busy, but just hang tight in case there's another question that comes up. Carl, I'll come to you in just a second. I do want to go to the chat. Victor Guzman had put this in the chat earlier. It's an important question. In light of the Governor Newsom being here and seeing the damage in Pajaro and the county doing its part to make requests for the federal support, what's the response from the county to the state, as they seemingly have not pushed that request to DC/FEMA yet? It's been over a week now. I think, I'll just briefly say that we're following up on it every day, and we're using every resource at our disposal, including daily phone calls to elected officials, both in Sacramento and Washington. Sonia De La Rosa, our CEO, has spent a tremendous amount of time on the phone with elected officials, lobbying for the needs of the people of Pajaro, and in fact, the needs of the entire county of Monterey. Sonia, would you like to add anything just real briefly to that question?
Sorry, I'm like challenged. I couldn't get to the button. So yes, we are in contact with our legislators. Senator Laird has been a great advocate and partner for our county in trying to keep this at the attention of Cal OES and trying to get all the information to then be able to provide it to the federal government. We actually have pretty much on standby our legislative federal partners as well, to ensure that once this is passed to them, they are ready to push for this to be authorized. So we are in constant contact. Actually, the call I took earlier was to discuss with Senator Laird and see if there's additional information that was needed. But thankfully, we have our partners from Cal OES on the ground with us today. And Kelsey's been meeting with them, as well as Tracy Malfino, to make sure that we are providing the details necessary to keep this moving. We know of primary importance is the individual assistance. We have a lot of folks in the shelter, but we also have a lot of folks within the community of Watsonville and in Monterey County that are staying at hotels in lieu of going to a shelter, and they are seeking that additional support. So we have conveyed that as well to all of our legislators, and they understand the urgency.
Great. Thank you so much, Sonia, for that. I'm going to go to the hands raised right now before I go back to the chat. Carl, you've had your hand raised and been patient. Appreciate it. Carl Cook, please identify the news agency you're with and go ahead with your question.
Thank you, Nick. Hi, my name is Carl Cook with KION News. So a couple questions I had in regard to the shelters there. I know that Nick, you and Sonia had gone Sunday and talked to some of the people there in the shelters. Something that was also mentioned to us and our colleagues was that, and this could be asked of those that work there at the shelters, that we were informed that some families said they were turned away from being accepted into the shelter. They're sleeping in their cars. And there was also that fear, like Sonia mentioned, of children missing school. So we're curious to know, for those who may not understand and get a little clarification, how are those shelters evaluating or accepting evacuees into those shelters? And the second question would be that if those shelters are filled, is the county planning on opening any other shelters near Pajaro? Because we know that there are some people that are over the bridge here that don't want to be evacuated too far from Pajaro. They want to kind of stay close to the vicinity and don't want to leave too far.
Yeah, Carl, thank you for that question. And it's a good question. No one is being turned away from the shelters. That's just a rumor that it's just not, that it's not the case at all. Some people have chosen to seek other alternative shelter other than the county operated shelters. We have plenty of capacity, as Rodrick had explained a few minutes ago, in our other 3 shelters, and we have capacity at the Santa Cruz County Fairgrounds. We have done outreach efforts, talking to people, using community-based organization partners to reach out to people, encouraging people to come to the shelter, to register, to check in. And so, I understand there's that the human aspect of not wanting to be too far away from home, and we get that very, very much. So right now we're focused entirely on reentry in some way, shape, or form to help people that can get back into the homes that are able to be occupied. So let me go to Jeremiah, who has his hand up, and then we're going to go back to the chat.
Hi there, Jeremiah Edding from KAZU. I think this is a question for Sonia. I was at the presser on Saturday. I talked to some residents some moms who wanted their kids there on the Pajaro side. So they didn't evacuate, but their kids are out of school right now. And they're afraid if they bring them to school on the Watsonville side, they won't be able to get back home, which seems to be the case. Is there any effort to give those families permission so these kids can return to school before reentry is allowed?
So that's actually something that we would coordinate with the school districts. And we do have presence from the school districts within our emergency operations center. So certainly we would work with them. I know one of the gals that came up to me asked me that specifically. She was more so with the relocation that, temporary relocation, potential longstanding relocation. She was asking if there was a way to do that coordination with the school district. So I know that we've been engaging with Pajaro, the school district that includes Pajaro, and that there's some process in place for that. Nick Pasculli, we could probably just circle back with our team at the EOC to make sure that's the connections being made. I know that we do have at the shelter some engagement from the school district. And so there is some crossover. And while we were there on Friday, I know that the kids were being dropped off from those that are continuing to attend school were being dropped off. So certainly that's something that we'll take back to the school district and ensure that it is addressed as well.
I heard that, I think it was reporting by Cal Matters, but I saw that maybe some of the schools in Pajaro will be closed indefinitely after this. And can you comment on what the plan is going forward? Are these kids going to the Watsonville schools instead? Has that been figured out?
Jeremiah?
Not yet.
Yeah.
Not yet. And the reason is because we, at this point, the families themselves don't know yet the circumstances with the homes, especially because we're dealing with about 75% that are renters. So it really is dependent on the property owners and some of those, that information. So there's a little bit that we need to do in terms of follow-up, but just know that we are coordinating with the school district. And at this point, it's too soon to be able to answer that, but there is coordination that's occurring.
And Jeremiah, I'd be happy to put you in contact with the Pajaro Valley Unified School District folks. Monterey County Office of Education is part of our EOC, and that information is being shared in both directions. We haven't gotten any information definitively about that, so I can put you in contact with them after the briefing. Just send me an email or give me a call on my cell phone. I know you have that number. All right, let's go back real quick. I'm going to go back to the chat. And I'm going to go to Derek has a question. Derek from KON in the chat. Is the county financially helping evacuees with housing, which includes hotels and or housing vouchers? So let's see, who do we want to see if we have somebody on from social services. Derek, I can circle back with you on that. As far as obviously we're helping evacuees with emergency shelter, no ifs, ands, or buts about it. We have also had occasions with people with serious medical conditions of arranging for motels close to their medical service providers. I will have to get back to you on the housing voucher. May is on the call right now. She's taking notes to get back and circle back to you on that information. I know that some nonprofits are offering vouchers as well, and we're obviously working with state. We're trying to work with the state and hopefully with federal partners for long-term housing solutions, which will be necessary because some of those homes will not be habitable in the very near future. So I appreciate your question, and we will get back to you. We'll circle back to you on that. All right, let's go back to which shelters will remain open. That's a very quick question to answer. They'll all remain open until there's no reason to have them open. And unless the census drops in a particular shelter. Well, we don't technically close the shelter. If that happens, we put it on what's called standby. which means that shelter would be ready to repopulate again if it dropped down below 0. So that we're not seeing yet, and so we're committed to keeping those open. Going to go back to the hands raised, and we're going to go back to Ray with the Monterey County Weekly, and then we're going to go to Barisa Cologne from KSBW. Go ahead, Ray.
Thank you. Is there, and maybe this is a question for the Chief Administrative Officer. Hi, Sonia. But just in general, anybody who could help me, do you guys have a sense of just what the threshold is on the damage front to qualify for FEMA assistance right now? When we're asking about this, we're getting a lot of, from state and even federal officials, damage is still being assessed. Our understanding is that there's a threshold that must be reached to qualify before the governor can make that request to Washington for the disaster declaration. Do we have any sense of kind of what that threshold is from a dollar figure? Or just kind of curious what that number is, what that threshold is to get the ball moving potentially, so that the region, so that area can qualify for that kind of assistance.
We could get that information for you. I know Kelsey was on here earlier. She's probably the most well-versed in terms of what the threshold is. I know that we're looking at various, we're looking at both the North and South Valley, communities. So it's, we can get you that and share it through Nick so that you have that, because I'm sure that that information is available, but I want to make sure that we get the most updated detail from Kelsey or Tracy.
Yeah, and then just follow up with me on an email, and I'll try to get you that information today. That the number will continue to change. So when we put in the initial estimate, it's based on the best knowledge we have at the time, and of course we were very quick to get that request in because we knew what we'd be facing, and that number is likely to grow. And we're also there's kind of a three-dimensional approach. You have the impact on individuals, homes, renters, property owners, but you also have the business aspect with agriculture and things of that nature. And the agriculture industry is still assessing their damages, which are likely to be very, very similar to what we saw, if not more, in January. So email me and we'll work to get you that information. All right. I want to go to Barisa Cologne. I'm going to go to Barisa, then Celia, before we go back to Sarah and Jeremiah. So Barisa, welcome to the briefing, and go ahead with your question, please.
Hello, thank you everyone for being here. My question is, I put it in the chat, but I would also want it verbally, just if I need to use it. I understand people will be let in by zone. Has that process been determined? I know CAL FIRE sent out their map and it's kind of designated. And Sonia also mentioned, young children could be more at risk. Will age play a factor in that? And has that been determined? And then I have one more question, just so I can say them both. How is the county updating their messaging for these residents to let them know you guys are making progress? You're on steps 2 and 3. Is there new flyers that are going to be going out? Where? At the border of the Watsonville-Pajaro Bridge or at the shelters? Where is that information being updated? I know the flyers that are going out today appear to be, just the list of the 4. Will there be an update on where you guys are now?
So the answer, yeah, go ahead, Sonia.
I did clarify with regard to the first question about children. I think more so there'll be challenges for folks who have small children, because there's quite a bit of cleaning that has to be done. So some of the strategizing that we're doing is, how do we support families that have very small children that are going to have to go in and clean their homes? It's really more of a logistics, is how do we support them so that they can do what they need to do while still caring for small children. And that's where it's going to be very important to have volunteers reach out to the nonprofit organizations that are going to be assisting us with the cleanup. We already spoke with them this morning, to the nonprofit organizations and community-based organizations, to, if they have volunteers that are willing to support, to please make them available. It takes a team of folks to appropriately clean a home, and what they are calling out muck out a home. And if you're one of the renters that's going to be, or one of the tenants that's going to be cleaning the site, it would be very difficult if it's just you and 2 small children while your spouse is still at work, to try to get that work done. And that's what I mean in terms of strategizing for the cleanups. And there was a second question in there. So Nick, you probably caught it.
Yeah, so Barisa, what we're working on right now is we're working on a number of additional handout materials, which includes STEP for cleaning, environmental issues, environmental health issues, as well as we are creating booklets with the maps. We're creating a number of booklets to have in multiple locations so that we can visually show, because not everybody, I think to somebody else's point, not everybody has access to those maps online. And so that's an effort. We're redistributing the information that we distributed the other day because the community asked for it. And the other thing we're doing is good old fashioned, we're going person to person. We have people from our Office of Emergency Service, Department of Emergency Management on site talking to folks. We have people from our equity office there in person. And then we're also distributing information, very detailed reports to our community-based organization partners so that they can be a conduit for sharing information. So more information will be coming to the residents as well. And also I want to mention, Barisa, we are planning a town hall meeting tomorrow night at 6:30 at the Resource Center at the fairgrounds. And you all are welcome to be there, in addition to our staff that'll be giving instructions and information, education with regard to next steps and reentry. We're using old school and new school ways of communicating, because that's the most important thing, is getting information to people. So thank you for your question.
Can I just follow up really quick?
Sure.
I'm not sure if my question was answered about the process for zones and how that was determined.
The community of Pajaro is broken down into zones as part of our emergency management system. And in any event, we have within multiple communities in our county, there are zones within those communities. You might be familiar with the state Cal OES's campaign, Know Your Zone, and that's in coordination with them. So there's no doubt, because you all have seen the maps, there are homes that were not damaged. There's no doubt about that. But again, because those homes haven't been damaged doesn't make it easy for people to go back. As Sonia had mentioned, as well as Tom Vonnegut from our Public Works Department, the sewer systems are not up yet, and neither is the water. So there's those factors that are being dealt with. We are in the planning process of how we're going to do that, and that I will, possibly by zones is a scenario that we're looking at. But I don't think, to the best of my knowledge, Sonia, you might have more information. I don't think a decision has been made on that yet. Yeah, that's correct. All right. So thank you, Barisa, for your question. Let's go to Celia, and then we'll go to Sarah.
Hi. Well, my question is regarding about people who are not staying at the shelters. I mean, I've talked with several of them. They're basically saying that they're making like a distinction between people who are in shelters versus those who aren't. So I'm just wondering, like, what resources are available for them? Like, where can they use restrooms, showers? They're staying on the streets, or where they can get food in case they need to. Because I was told that some people have gone to the shelters and they have said that the resources that they have there are only for the people who are in the shelters.
So what we're doing right now is we are looking for ways to disseminate information to the folks that have chosen not to go to the shelters. We are partnering with community-based organizations to provide the same information that the people that are in the shelters are getting. And so that has been done, that has been done, and that continues to be done. With regard to other accommodations for folks, we have capacity at the shelters. The safest place to be, and many community leaders from Pajaro have said this to the people, the safest place to be, the most comfortable place to be is at the shelters. Is it home? No, it's not home, and we know that. But it is the safest place to be, where the most accommodations can be made for people. We are looking at other alternatives in the community of Pajaro. Those are being discussed as we speak. It's Craig Spencer, who's in charge of our planning. Maybe Craig, maybe you can shed a little light on maybe some of the planning or some of the thought process that are going on with regard to that need. I see Craig's picture, but maybe he's on the phone. Craig, can you hear me? Celia, can we circle back and we'll get you that information directly after this briefing.
Oh, and I do have one more thing to say. Can you send to everyone all the answers for all the questions? Because I know you're going to circle back with some of them.
Yeah, we're recording this, and our practice is after the recording, we upload it and we send you all the link. Here's Craig. Craig, can you, Celia had a question from, with regard to accommodations for bathrooms and showers for those that aren't staying in the shelter. And I briefly mentioned the fact that we are discussing those things from a planning standpoint. Do you have can you share any other information about that?
We are discussing having temporary chemical toilets, showers, and hand sanitizing stations throughout Pajaro. That is in the works and imminent, I believe. At this time, there aren't any county provided facilities around Pajaro for people to use that I know of. Does that answer the question?
Yeah, thank you, Craig. I appreciate you being there. Let's jump back over to Sarah and then over to Aldo, because Aldo hasn't got to ask a question yet. So go ahead, Sarah.
Thank you. And some of my questions were answered. I want to return to the question of evacuation orders. And I think at least Under Sheriff Boyd was here. If he still is, there's been this important distinction, I think, between repopulation and reentry. And the question that we're hearing is, now that some of these preliminary things have been done, the CAL FIRE assessment on structural integrity, and from this meeting, we're hearing that Public Works is almost complete on the street and sidewalk sweeping and cleanup. Even if certain buildings remain tagged not safe to enter, are we getting closer? Is there any sense of timing on when evacuation orders might start to lift? Obviously not the structure by structure level, but what are the things that we're still waiting for then to happen before the evacuation orders lift and people can at least re-enter to scope out the damage, or just go back to their homes, even if briefly, for the time being?
That's a great question, Sarah, and we thank you for that. Under Sheriff Boyd did have to jump off for another meeting. I think Chief Hoyne is on with us. Chief, are you able to shed any light on that at this particular point in time? I see the chief, but I don't know if he can hear me, or I certainly can't hear him. Sarah, let me just try to give you the PIO's response to that question. So what I know is possible and is being discussed as well from a planning standpoint is changing orders to warnings by zone. Okay, so it is possible. Obviously, we've been lifting orders or lowering orders to warnings, or eliminating orders and warnings altogether in other areas of the county. And that is something that is possible in Pajaro as well. And I can tell you that those discussions, because I've been involved in them, are going on almost every hour on the hour. And we're doing our check-ins with all the departments to kind of get a status update so that we can make those decisions. So those are things that are being discussed, and decisions will be made, I think, in the coming days. I don't know, Craig or Tom Vonnegut from Public Works, if you want to add anything to that.
No, not beyond the update I provided earlier.
Okay, Craig, do you have any other comment to make on that? No,
I've got nothing to add.
Okay. All right, so we will definitely be keeping you but you'll get the information first. I can assure you of that. So thank you for that, Sarah. Let's go to Aldo, and then we'll wrap up.
Can you guys hear me?
Yes, we can hear you.
Yeah, okay. So I have a couple of questions. So one of them is on the rent issue. So can landlords charge people rent if the home has been damaged or if it's not inhabitable?
I don't know the answer to that question. That's something we are pursuing with some nonprofit legal partners. We have the Watsonville Law Center that will be giving a presentation tomorrow at night at the town hall meeting to talk about that very issue. I just don't have an attorney that is familiar with leases and landlord law on the Zoom today. I apologize for that.
And then, there's a few structures that I noticed in that map that are shown as destroyed, with over 50% damage. What exactly does that mean? And like, what happens to those homes?
I'll have to defer to Craig on that.
Yeah, so the maps were created by the Cal Fire Damage Inspection Assessment. Destroyed means that there's a complete failure of 2 or more major structural components. Walls are collapsing essentially, and that structure will likely need to be demolished. Those will probably be also red tagged by our local building inspectors.
And what happens? Do you know how many people live in those homes? Because they're the only 3 that are red right now.
We don't have those numbers, no. Some of them are not residential, but we don't know exactly how many people live in the residential ones.
And then in terms of the habitability of the other major damage homes, like all the orange that we see on the map, what's the timeline on that? And what does that usually mean?
So orange means there was 18 inches or more of water that impacted that home. That might mean that there is mud inside the home. There was a need to remove flooring and sheetrock and things like that to clean out, air out. So I don't know the timeline on that. Everyone will be different. Insurance adjusters may be involved, but there will be crews with our local community partners out helping support people who are ready to start cleaning up as soon as people get back in.
And thank you for that, Craig. And thank you for your question, Aldo. I'm sorry we couldn't get to the rest of the questions. We're slightly over our hour. We do appreciate you all being here. Just to note that there are a lot of questions that people have, and we are aware of it, and we're doing our best to get those questions answered. Certainly, I want to extend the invitation to you. If you have additional questions that we can run down for you that you did not get the answer you wanted today, we will be happy to do so, as long as we have the information available to us. Our goal is to give you the same information that we have, and to get it to you quickly and transparently and accurately. And we appreciate you and your patience as we do that. I want to thank you all for being on the briefing today. We will probably have a briefing tomorrow, although tomorrow we imagine will be a very, very busy day with regard to the town hall meeting. We encourage you all in the media to attend that town hall meeting. It'll be tomorrow night at 6:30 at the Santa Cruz County Fairgrounds in the Resource Center, which is not the shelter. It's a building that's being used to house nonprofit and community-based organizations to provide information, referral to the guests at the shelter and also to the evacuees. So thank you for being on our briefing today, and have a great rest of your day. Take care.